So what's up, guys?
Well, it's fourth Tuesday of the month. I had to think which one it was. Yeah, second fourth Tuesday each month. We go on that here with Liberty is Treason, and this is myself, Ricky Tips, Cody Booker's with us, and Cody. I'm waiting for you to tell me what we're talking about today.
I really don't know what we're talking about today, Rick. So usually I scan the news. You know, I'm a pretty savvy news consumer. I scan the news and I try to find something that I think we need to tell Franklin County. But at this point, I think I might be exhausted, Ricky. I'm COVID exhausted. I'm politics exhausted. I'm American problem exhausted. And when I reflected on all that, it really hit home why. It's because I keep listening to the crap, Ricky. It's because I'm a savvy news consumer. If you know as well as I know, I deleted all my social media a few months ago, and I've never done anything better, I think, in my life. It's caused me a lot of peace and gotten rid of a lot of my anxiety. But I think now, at least after this election, I may need to do the same thing as far as news goes. Just turn it off for a while, because it's just, we're inundated with the negative. And, you know, I was having a conversation with our last guest from our last show just the other day, Shane Robbins. And he said something, and you know, he's always introducing me to new phrases or new terms or things that are new to me anyway. And he said primrose path in this conversation, and as I often have to do with Shane, I was like, well, what does that really mean? I've heard that a million times, the primrose path. What does it mean to go down the primrose path? Well, so I Googled it, like we all would. And Webster's dictionary defines it as the pursuit of pleasure, especially when it is seen as bringing disastrous consequences. And when I reflected on that phrase, I realized that most of human culture's problems are due to exactly that. It's due to engaging our emotional brain rather than our cognitive brain, doing what feels good for now rather than doing what is good over the long run. And so in that conversation with Shane was trying to basically narrow down, you know, we do this often, back and forth. We try to figure out, well, if we were king of the world, what would we do to solve these problems? How would we solve them? You know, is there a single point solution? Is there a unified, you know, peace theory in all of human culture, or is it too complex and we need to break it up into sections? And one thing I think that came out of that conversation is, and I don't know that we've ever lost it. I don't want to involve myself in golden ageism where I look back like at some point in history we had this figured out. I don't know that we ever have, but I really think the key right now is empathy and sympathy. And I think, and follow me on this line of logic here, but I think we've both addressed and we've discussed it on the show, is one of the problems with social media is the echo chamber, is the fact that people will only like or align themselves with people who already believe what they believe or already like what they like. And I really think as we become, you know, this generation is really experimental in the fact that no generation has ever been inundated with so much information so quickly, and I don't think we're digesting it that well. So I really think if we were going to address one of the key fundamental tenets of how we can fix the problems of society now, we need to engage in more empathy and sympathy. And instead of doing what I did and turning off social media, what I would ask the public to do is find 3 or 4 pages or people to follow that have opposing views that you have, and read what they have to say and try to engage them peacefully and in a nice way, and trying to actually understand their point of view, because our countrymen are not our enemies. You know, as I just listened to a bunch of second graders say the Pledge of Allegiance, I found it a poignant address, that they were pledging allegiance to the Republic. And you know, we can say what we want to about the flag, but I think in the Pledge of Allegiance, the flag actually stands for our people and our countrymen. And when you know, if you were to ask those second graders, you know, who do you hate? They'd probably say no one. So then if you reflect on that, why do we hate who we hate? It's because we're being told to hate people. You know, Fox is telling us to hate the left, and CNN's telling us to hate the right. And at the end of the day, aren't all of them that are saying hate really wrong? And aren't they the ones steering us toward the iceberg, steering us off the cliff? So why do we as Americans engage that? It's the primrose path. We're doing what's easiest rather than engage what's hard. And it's often hard to listen to our countrymen and understand what their point of view is.
You know, for me, the easiest way to explain the primrose path to me was it's the difference in playing checkers and chess. You know, checkers, you're trying to make that move. You know, you get that significant. You know, every move has an immediate reaction. Where chess, it's the long game. You know, you might make a move because you're trying to entice someone 4 moves down the road to do this.
And that's a really good analogy, actually.
And that was how it was explained to me, the Primrose Path, the first time because the same thing, I didn't understand what it was first time I heard it, and I asked, and that was how they explained the game to me, or explained the phrase to me. Is it's the difference between playing checkers and chess. That's why if you ever hear me talk about something, I always tell them, I'm not playing checkers, I'm playing chess. I say it all the time to people.
Yeah.
And the other thing, it's with your empathy and sympathy. The problem is conversations and dialogues nowadays. Conversations and dialogues have changed. People don't have conversations to absorb. They have conversations to respond. They don't listen. They don't listen to bring in knowledge. They listen to figure out what they're going to say next to what you're saying instead of absorbing what you're saying and taking it to heart. It's for reaction, not for interaction. And that's one of the biggest problems I'm seeing, especially when you go to social media aspects of things, is people don't read and actually absorb the comments and try to, figure out why. It's, how do I react to this?
And it's not well thought out.
Yeah.
And then you've got that whole percentage of trolls who are just on there to elicit a emotional response.
So that's another big issue. I think, conversations, it's a lost art. People don't have conversations anymore.
But how is that, Ricky, when people are communicating more than they ever have due to texting and phones and social media and all that?
Yeah, but you're not, like I said, you're not having a conversation you don't absorb. People aren't talking to absorb knowledge. They're not talking to interact and to really get in-depth conversation. They'll have a conversation, but they're not listening.
Yeah, it's almost like they're
trying to react.
They're mimicking our political spectrum, which just rests on talking points, it seems. That's where so many of us get frustrated in things like debates where the moderator will ask a question and the politician absolutely does not answer it. He just hits, one of the Republican talking points or one of the Democratic talking points or goes through and never actually answers the question that our public is almost mimicking.
I will say this is the worst debate cycle I've ever seen in my life.
I will say this, and this may surprise you. I don't know if we've discussed this or not, but as far as the last debate goes, I thought, as much as I dislike Donald Trump, he continues to surprise me. The minute I think he's a abject moron, he comes on and looks brilliant. And I really think he, except for one point, he destroyed Joe Biden in that debate. Had Trump had that performance in the first debate, I think the polls would be dramatically different. And I think the early voting may have hurt Trump in that, whereas so many votes got cast before even this last debate even occurred. But yeah, it's funny. I think CNN stole the show on headlines, though. Did you see the headline after the debate that CNN put up? It said everybody came to the debate expecting a brawl, and a debate broke out. I thought that was a pretty good headline.
But that's the thing. This has been the most disappointing debate season that I've seen.
Well, we missed one presidential debate, right? They didn't do it at all. And then, they did the town halls, but that's not really a debate.
So,
And the first one wasn't a debate at all. It was just a shouting contest.
I'm very upset with the way, and I think, honestly, that's why the second debate was the way it ended up being, is because so many people were disappointed in the first one. That I think they realized that, we've got to actually do our job this time around. We can't just get up there and look like, dancing chickens under the fire.
Well, Trump had some repair to do in the last debate, and then Biden, it's an old saying in politics: never punch down and never lose the high ground. And since he perceived he had the high ground, all he had to do was do no harm, right? And Trump had a lot of repair to do.
But there's also the saying that you don't let up steam when you have the lead.
Yeah.
And I think he let up a lot of steam in that last debate.
I tell you, as much as Trump's demeanor and actually addressing policy finally impressed me, Joe Biden actually impressed me also, and at least in one fair part. When he was called on the 94 crime bill, which is my greatest criticism of Biden because it has disproportionately affected minorities and especially the black community, he admitted there. He absolutely said, yes, the 94 crime bill was a mistake. I shouldn't have pushed it. And one thing I hope to repair if I win the presidency, is repairing the damage done, or at least trying to repair the damage done by the '94 crime bill. And then he went on to address drugs, which is what I started to do today's show on, and fall in line with empathy and sympathy, and the fact that we shouldn't hate our drug addicts. We should love them, because the fact is they're our brothers, our sisters, our cousins, and our sons and daughters. But when he talked about drugs, it's the first time I've ever heard a politician with that sort of bully pulpit that the Vice President of the United States, former Vice President of the United States, has addressed the fact that maybe we should legalize all drugs, and that maybe we should stop putting all this money into the militarization of our police departments in fighting the war on drugs with guns and cannons and battering rams, and take that same money and put it into social programs to bring our sons and daughters and our cousins back into society from the drug epidemic. And you know as well as I do, we've both lost friends to the drug epidemic. And heck, just yesterday I was chasing a friend down that I bailed out of jail that also has fallen into drug problems. And the funny thing is as I reflect on, and I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but as I reflect on the drug problem, and I know it's crazy to say that I hate drugs, I hate drug addiction, but I think that all drugs should be legal. But what I'd ask our listeners to think about is which is worse? Is having them legal and having social programs there to help the people recover worse than having them illegal? And I mean, really, what are we doing? We're building more and more jails, locking up more and more of our population. The United States, puts more people in prison per capita
than anywhere else in the world.
Anywhere else in the world. And more than 50% of our inmates are nonviolent drug offenders. So we've taken people that, in my opinion, have a disease. And if you don't believe it's a disease, I think you really need to look, educate yourself and dig more into this issue. Like I said, personally, we've had two friends that used to be, had houses, wives, kids, great jobs, and everything else. And the one we lost here a few years ago, started legitimately. He had a neck problem, had surgery, and got on pills and never came back. Just kept going, sliding down that slope, and now he's gone. Now he's dead. And I mean, I can remember 10 years ago, we were coaching Pee Wee football together. We were coaching, baseball together. He had a family of 4, a wife and kids. We used to hang out every night by the campfire and play guitars. And what he turned into was a monster of sorts. And here a lot of the public may listen to me say that, and then hear me say that drugs should be legal, and think, well, that's crazy. But that all happened, Ricky, while drugs were illegal. What's happening to my other friend right now? Drugs are illegal, and it's not stopping that. We're not stopping the horrors that drugs are doing to society. I think we're actually making them worse, because now they're in the system. Now they're on paper. Now they're back and forth to court. They're violating probation. They're having to get drug tested. And the whole time they're having to fight this legal problem while fighting their demon, too. And that's not really right. We should be helping them and not giving them another monster to fight.
There are countries who have done this. There are places who have made drugs legal, and I'm trying to remember what was the
Portugal.
Yeah, what was the outcome of that? I forget what the numbers were on that.
Just off the top of my head, I know the last time that I checked on the Portugal model, I know I'll say this because it's been quite a few years. So for the first 3 years, and this is only because this is only the data I know, but the data that I know is for the first 3 years they had 0 drug overdoses. They had their teen and child rate use of drugs had plummeted. And a lot of it was just due to a lot of the systems they'd set up to help people recover. And then the thing is once people started to recover, they joined the system and helped other people recover. And it became like a cascading effect of goodness and kindness of people helping people dig themselves out of that hole rather than locking them in a cage. And I first heard about this in a book, and I forget who wrote it, but it was called Chasing the Scream. And it really lays out everything in a very objective and scientific manner of the countries that have tried decriminalization or legalization. And that's funny because our next guest next week will be Cole Ebel, the former chairman of the Libertarian Party of Tennessee, and he's as libertarian as it gets. And me and him used to fight constantly over the fact that he didn't want drugs legal. He said they should be decriminalized. And it took me a while to understand the differences between illegal and decriminalized. So decriminalized would actually make it still illegal, but you wouldn't be subject to basically legal repercussions. It's just a mechanism that the law can use to force you into a system. So if I, as a police officer, have to go to your house, 3, 4, 5 times, 6 times, or whatever the rules they set up, and it's always issues with you and drugs. Well, boom, as a police officer, I can hit you with a ticket that forces you to rehab. Or forces you to court, where a court would determine that you would have to go to rehab based on your history, based on the problems that you've been having. And that seems to be a very effective. A lot of countries have followed the Portugal model and not gone fully legal, but decriminalized it, and that also seems to be an effective path.
For me, I think that's more of a... I would say that's probably more of the path I could see the United States leaning towards. I don't see the legalizing everything. I can't imagine heroin ever getting legal, or crack ever getting legal, or meth ever getting legalized.
But it was.
Until they saw the effects of it. People using it recreationally. And that's when it got illegal. That's when it hit the illegal status.
Well, it became politicized.
Everything, at one point, when you don't realize what it actually did. I mean, at one point, Coca-Cola had cocaine in it. Until they realized what the effect of it was, then it got changed.
Yeah, because it got politicized. But if you go back and look at the numbers, that's one of the things Chasing the Extreme did. Is it? I remember this number, 2.9%. So what they said is the studies that they had followed, so they did this periodically over the decades. They did this from like the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and then 2000s. And what they looked at was how many people that tried or used hard or illicit drugs like heroin and like cocaine and things like that, and then how many of those people became addicts or fell into the disease of addiction. And it was around 2.9%. But what they showed was it always was, Ricky. It was in the 50s, it was in the 60s, it was 2.9%, and it still is today. It's about 2.9%. And you can say what you want to about, anthropology and human nature and why that is. I really don't know why that is, but it's about 2.9%. So why wouldn't we? And inevitably, I do probably agree with what you're about to say. I can see the look on your face. And inevitably, I do believe that at first, we may have a spike in hard drug use. I agree. And then what follow that spike, inevitably, according to the study, would be that 2.9% of those people ended up addicted, right? Or new addicts, where we didn't have addicts before. But then what you have to look at, it's kind of like inflation in economics. Aren't we getting new addicts anyway? Aren't new people trying heroin every day anyway? But what we don't have is a mechanism for them to get out, is a mechanism to save them, to really save them.
I agree, but I think that's why you go from the decriminalization instead of legalization, where it's, you're not going to get put into incarcerated for this, but you are going to get mandated that you have to get help.
And I'll agree with you, but not for the reasons that not for the same reasons that you think it's legal. I think it's because it's the only thing that would ever pass, because you're not going to get all the lawyers, the prosecutors, the DAs to give up their honey wagon, to give up their, what feeds them, what makes them all the money. You're not going to get them to give up that system. So you'd still have to replace the system with a similar system that still feeds the system. So I can see the United States probably doing something like that, and probably something as heartless as forcing the addict to then repay the taxpayers or whatever for all the services that they had, which I think is a terrible idea. But that's probably how it would end up in this country.
No, because I think you just replace the cost of incarceration. It's $65 or $72, somewhere in that range, a day to house an inmate in Franklin County. So you would replace that money that's going to put them into the jail system, and that's what you would spend per day for a rehab facility. So the money's there. It's not like you're having to create new money.
And that would go right along with what you and I discussed before with Sheriff Fuller.
Yeah.
And he was in agreement about the defund the police, that we didn't really want to, get rid of the police, but we wanted to replace some of the police with social workers that could help these addicts or help these people with mental problems.
I think that's the way you go with this, is it's not, the money's there to put them through a rehab facility and to have that taken care of. I know it costs more than $72 a day for rehab, for a good rehab facility, but I know that there is facilities that you can go to, and that's about roughly what you're going to spend. So I think that it's there. Like, there's the ability to have that is already in play. My thing, though, still is if you decriminalize it, there's people who won't. Now, you say the 2.9%. If you look at 2.9% of the population in 1950 compared to 2.9% of the population in 2020.
I think they measured that. That's
the growth.
Most statisticians measure that, though.
Yeah, but I'm saying
that's why they say 2.9% per capita.
I understand 2.9%. That's fine, but 2.9% of the because of the growth in the population from 1960 to 2020 over 60 years is astronomical. At 2.9%, you're looking at what, 1 million?
Yeah, but they're already here, Ricky. They're already there. You may have went to the hospital and got stitches from a doctor who was a heroin addict. You may have went to see a lawyer who had, just done a line of cocaine. You may go see, your restaurant manager who just got out of the back and popped 4 Percocets. They're already there.
I'm not saying they're not. I'm just saying that the percent, like 2.9%, sounds good, but if you actually put a physical number to that, because of the growth of the population.
Well, that's why I said inevitably you'd see a spike, but after that spike, what you'd see, if we have the proper social systems that's helping people, is you'd see more people that have pulled themselves out of the ditch because they've been helped. You so often hear that phrase, if you give a man a fish, he eats for a day. If you teach him to fish, he eats for a lifetime. But nobody ever gave the dude a fishing pole. Sometimes, like it or not, we're all in this together. Like it or not, humanity, we need help. No man is an island. Nobody can do it by himself. And that's all I'm saying is maybe we give these addicts a fishing pole. And then when they get a fishing pole, they'll learn to fish, which is cure themselves, or they'll learn mechanisms just like AA, they learn mechanisms to get better, and then they'll pass that down to the next generation. And then maybe we can build up a core of people who've fought this problem in the United States and are willing to help other people dig our way out, rather than create enmity, which is separation and divide by being mad at them and hating them and saying, well, we just throw them in jail. Because that's not helping our society what's the inevitable end? That 50 or 80% of our whole population is in prison and the rest just live to support them. That's just stupid. That's not helping anybody. And I say this, Ricky, because after hearing what Biden had to say, and like it or not, neither Trump nor Biden are my guy in particular, but I do feel that Biden will probably win this election, and I think most of the polls reflect that. And when and if he does, which you're going to start hearing a lot of from the liberals and from the left and from the Democrats, is exactly what I'm saying about decriminalizing drugs. So what I'd like Franklin County to do is hear me when I say this, and when you hear them say that, don't immediately attack them just because they're Democrat. Don't immediately attack them just because they're liberal. Use your empathy, use your sympathy, and try to understand where they're coming from. Because it's only together with the liberals and with the conservatives and all the rest of them in between that don't consider them, it's only together that we're going to pull ourselves out of any mess. If we keep fighting all the time, this is not going to end up well. This is a country that will not fare well in any sort of revolt or civil war.
No, you're 100% right on that. But I think we're trying to get to the same place, but doing it 2 slightly different ways. I still have a problem with completely legalizing.
Yeah, there's no way that would ever be. I mean, I took that to the extreme.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to walk before you crawl, or crawl before you walk, and walk before you run, and run before you fly, right? So the United States would have to start somewhere. And that's the beauty of being a republic too, is that certain cities and certain states can go ahead and do that, and then we can watch them and see how it worked out, and then model it, make it better.
And you got a good point. 'Cause it kind of goes back to the.
I mean, we saw it with marijuana. 27 states have legal marijuana now, and oh my God, the world didn't end.
Yeah.
I mean, all that effectively happened is the sale of Cheetos went way up, and Funyuns, because that's everybody knows only stoners eat Funyuns.
And that will happen this year in Tennessee.
Well, I think according to the Democrats, if Biden were to win, that's in their 100-day. The first 100 days is to federally legalize marijuana, which let's not talk about whether we like that or not, but how, if they did, what would that actually mean? And I believe, you may correct me if I'm wrong, that what that would actually mean is, say the feds legalize marijuana, well, state of Tennessee initially wouldn't have a program. They would have to either call an emergency session and pass a bill, or wait till the next legislative session in the beginning of next year and create a bill, and then to basically set up the structure of how it would work in Tennessee. Because I believe if they do it nationwide, I believe it'll probably only be medical.
Yeah.
So the states would have to determine, who was able to grow it, how many growers they needed based on what the prospective supply forecasting and on all that stuff. So I would anticipate if it does happen, the stoners won't be able to toke up till probably July 1st of next year. It's always July 1st or January 1st.
July 1st.
New laws happen, right? So probably July 1st of next year.
I got a feeling that when it does happen, it doesn't matter either way. Tennessee's going to pass it this year, July 1st. It'll be a bill on Tennessee, I have a feeling.
I hope so. I think it's our senator's bill, right?
Yes.
Janice Bowling's.
Yep, Janice is pushing it, and so is Iris is through the House.
Yeah, that's one thing I can say about our representatives. They've really pushed this issue well, I think, and fought the right fight on this one, because I personally believe that if a doctor, with 50 years of education or whatever tells you that you need to take arsenic to get better, then you take the arsenic, because that's what doctors do. They know their game, and if they say you should smoke pot and it'd make your ailment better, then that's what you should do.
But to get back to our point there and going.
Oh, we went deep down this rabbit hole.
Oh yeah, we did. A lot further than I thought we were going to. Going back to where we started with the debates, I think the second debate, like I said, was a lot better because the first one was such a disaster. I think both sides realized we can't let the public see this again. Like both parties are like, no, we can't let this happen, because both parties got a black eye from that first debate. Both sides took a shot, and everyone, like I don't care who you were and what side you're for, everyone I knew was like, I turned the debate off 15 minutes into it in the first one.
Yeah, I made it 18 minutes. And I couldn't watch it anymore.
And they're like, it's so bad. It's so
there was
bad.
there was no content. It was just
it was a shouting
two men
match.
that were angry at one another.
Yep.
Right?
And I think that's why the second debate went so much better, just because I believe both parties were like, look, you can't do that again.
Well, let's don't forget why the second debate was civil. They had to give the moderator a mute button. That's really the only thing that kept them. But really, doesn't that Ricky, doesn't that exemplify what's wrong with our country? Is that those two sides are so far apart, or perceptively so far apart, when they may not really be.
The key word you just said was perceptively.
Right. If those two men really sat down and talked things through, would they be that far apart on most things? I don't think so. I think they would just get caught up in jingoism and phrasing and talking points and things like that, but not really dig into the issue enough to see that they're both probably in the same place. I mean, I don't think that Trump doesn't want what's best for America. I don't think Biden doesn't want what's best for America. It's just like, I don't think Al-Qaeda thinks they're the enemy or they're the bad guy, right? Nobody does. Everybody thinks that his side is the right side, that his side is the winner. And I really think the only thing that causes all this hate and enmity and everything else is lack of communication, that we don't sit down and talk to one another and find out we're really talking about the same darn thing.
Yeah, and that goes back to actually having conversations to absorb instead of respond. And that's full circle now. I mean, I really feel that is the biggest downfall in our society today, is not listening to people and not having a great conversation where you sit down and you really talk and you really pick minds. I highly recommend, and I know people that might not want to hear this, I highly recommend a bourbon in a back porch to anybody.
Yeah, with someone with opposing views.
Yeah. And saying that's how this show came to existence, was a bourbon in a porch. Cody and I would sit down and have a few drinks and we would get into it, because we don't see eye to eye on a lot of things. But we were able to conversate and have, true conversations, and not just argue and scream, actually debate and talk and discuss topics to the point that both of us, at the end of it, I feel, come away with something. So I highly recommend, anybody, have a conversation, sit down and talk and listen. And like you said, go, look at the opposing views. Don't look at it and say, oh, that's wrong because it's not the way I think. I hate to burst your bubble, but the way you think isn't always right. Your thought process isn't always correct. So don't be afraid to look at different point of views and to think outside of the box. And don't, just because this is the way it's been done and always been done, think that that's the way it has to always be done.
And don't forget that people are operating on separate facts a lot of times.
It's true too.
Like the Venn diagram that Plato came up with, that said that, if you take one circle, that's all your knowledge, and then one circle, that's all your belief. When they cross in the middle, what you're going to have is your truth. So if your knowledge is a little bit different than my knowledge, or your beliefs are a little bit different than my beliefs, your truth will be different than mine. And I know that sounds strange because truths can't be different, right? But they absolutely are when they're more of a matter of opinion, when they're more of a matter of what you're based on. So when you sit across from your liberal friend, or you're liberal, and you sit across from your conservative friend, and they make a statement that you don't agree with, don't immediately grab for your heartstrings. Don't get emotional. Ask them where they got their data. Ask them why they believe that. What things have occurred to make you believe that. And we really need to stop with the hubris and start engaging in humility too. And that was one of the things that I think Joe Biden impressed me with. It was that he was willing. I've never heard a politician at that level willing to admit that they made an error. And in a debate with another that's powerful, powerfully humble, in my opinion, too, because we all know they've screwed up, right? When, Trump screwed up, Biden screwed up, Clinton screwed up, Bush screwed up. They've all screwed up, but how many of them will stand up there and say, admit to it? And I'm not, trying to push the vote one direction or the other. I'm just observing what I saw. And I think we could all use a little bit of that. We could all use a little bit of humility in our conversations.
It's kind of funny you're talking about, everyone's truth's a little different. I remember when I was living in Korea, I was stationed over there, we had found a textbook, a North Korean textbook, and was reading some of the historical, marks. It was a history book.
Oh, I was surprised. I thought you were going to say all that said every page was North Korea's the best, North Korea's the best.
Well, one of the Katusa, the Korean soldiers that was served with us, was translating it, showing us what it all said, and how far from the actual history we've been taught this textbook was astonishing. Like how it had America as like the Antichrist in there, and how we caused World War I, how we caused World War II, how we caused the Korean conflict, and it was all just pretty much how America was horrible, and how we started all the problems, and how North Korea, it played them up to be the martyrs so much in that. And we're sitting there looking, and I was like, for us, those facts don't align with what we've been taught, what we've been shown. But for those North Korean students who read that textbook, that's their truth.
Sure.
That's what they know. That's what they believe. So you're right. Where did you get your data?
And try to see the other side and see that there are two sides. That one side, and both sides may be true. It's like exactly like you said. I was just thinking as you were talking. I'm probably thinking about what I was going to say rather than listening to what you were saying. But I was listening, Ricky. But George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, the guys that we looked at, Samuel Adams, the guys that we look at as heroes, Paul Revere, those guys. Don't forget they spoke with an English accent. Every one of them were English and betrayed their country. So what would an English history book say? It would say that these rich aristocrats, a lot of them autocrats, basically took loans from King George and from different banks in England, and then rather than repay them, they became rebel rousers and wrote these beautiful words that basically inspired the peasantry, for the most part, to take up arms against the king and overthrow the king so that the rich guys wouldn't have to pay the money back. That's what an English history book would say. But ours called George Washington and those guys heroes for getting us out from under a king, and here 200 years later we've put ourselves right back under one. But but yeah, history is written by the victors, right? And there's always two sides to every story. Yep. And I feel exactly what you're saying. There's two sides to every story. I promise you, if you were to walk up to one of the houses you see a Biden, Younglove sign in front of, and you were to knock on the door and you were to ask them their perspectives and why they believe what they believed, you may be surprised that they're not the devil and they don't have horns.
My biggest problem is seeing the Biden and the Trump signs for people who don't necessarily know why they have the Biden and the Trump signs. And there's a large group of the electorate who are voting off of headlines instead of actual factual knowledge.
And I'm not even going to hate them for it, Ricky, because we've discussed this. It's in this day and age, with as busy as people are and the busy lives we lead, how do you parse through all the information to know what's right and what's wrong, who's right and who's wrong? And I think I may have solved that, and that's John. Well, I didn't. John Prine solved that when he said, "Turn off the TV, throw away the newspaper, and quit looking at it so much every day. This 24-hour news cycle has done nothing but make enemies of us all, and that's really what needs to happen, I think."
Then how are you getting educated?
Well, is that the failure of democracy then? Shane and I talked about that too. So is the failure of democracy the fact that so much of our public who can vote are uninformed? And to go back to Jim Crow laws, should we create a system again to where you have to take a test to vote, where you have to know certain things to vote, where you have to at least go to a certain class to vote? Then what happens when that class becomes politicized or objectivized? You know what I mean? It's kind of a slippery slope. So it's kind of every citizen's just duty to inform themselves, and that's why really when I hear that that 60% of our voting age populace a lot of times doesn't vote depending on the election year at all, I used to think that was a tragedy, but now in some ways I think it may be good, because maybe, and I've heard people actually say this. I've heard people, and that's a noble thing to say. They say, "I don't know enough about it to vote." So maybe their lives are too busy. I'm not going to judge them. Maybe they're not capable of understanding a lot of the complications and intricacies of policy and government policy, or maybe it's just not something that interests them. I'm not going to hate them for it. But that's to me a noble approach. If you don't understand what you're voting for, don't vote for it. And that goes back to kind of the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? How the Dunning-Kruger effect is how people always feel that they know more about a subject than they actually know. It is tethered right along with self-bias, where we always look at ourselves as being the smartest in the room or whatnot. But the Dunning-Kruger effect, I think, is what you were talking about when you talk about all these signs and stuff in people's yards and people presupposing that they're voting for something. And I really don't think so. Do you believe that if you went and asked those people, they wouldn't have a reason they were voting? No, sure they would, right?
They would have a reason. But my question is, what is the reason? Like, is it...
I mean, even if it's just a talking point they spit from Fox News or from CNN, they have a reason.
Like I said, it's a headline thing for me. It's, are you voting for the person because of what the headlines say? Are you voting for the person because you've actually done a deep dive and you've looked into their policies and you've looked into what they plan to do? Like you said, Biden's first 100 days, these are things he wants to have done the first 100 days. Trump has his first 100 days of his reelection, what he wants to have done. And you look into those, and those are things that really, mean something to you, and those are things you want to see happen. Have you looked into that? Do you know what those things are? That's the problem I have with it, is people are just nowadays CNN, Fox News. This is what they tell me. This is what I do. And you're not... I use the example a lot of times, you're not the person, you're on the stage, but someone's standing there pulling your strings. And that's what I feel the major media has turned out to. And I would say probably 30% of the voters who vote, they're dancing on stage while someone else is twiddling the strings.
Yeah, following partisan lines. You and I have discussed this. The biggest problem in our politics is partisanship, the belief that you have to be on one side or the other. And, it's like Dan Carlin said, if you gave me CNN 20 years ago, I could have fixed it, but not now. They're too far gone. So CNN may be based on the success of seeing how it's worked with Fox News and seeing how basically going full bore, right or left, which is what Fox did, went full bore on the conservative side, went full bore, always supporting the conservative president or, conservative politicians no matter what. And then CNN has done the same thing now, except on the left. You can't turn on CNN now without seeing them just constantly bashing Trump and the right, Mitch McConnell, all of them. But then what they either seem to not care about because it's profitable, and which is probably the case, or they don't notice, which I doubt because they probably notice everything, is that they're the fundamental part that's dividing our country is and making people believe the other side is the devil, or the other side is actually going to attack their way of life or their values, their personal values. There's people in Franklin County right now, probably listening to us right now, that believe that if the liberal left were in charge, that they would pretty much destroy America and turn it into a socialist communist state, no different than 1970s Marxist Russia. But that's just not true, because the other side exists. And I think that's where this tit for tat, and you addressed this earlier, it's like a tit for tat retribution cycle, something you said earlier. One side punches, the other side punches harder. And what we don't realize is we're digging ourselves into a deeper and deeper trough. Okay, so look at what's about to happen. What's about to happen, quite possibly, is that the Republicans lose the Senate. When the Republicans lose the Senate, the Democrats already own the House and probably will retain it. Well, if we give Joe Biden a supermajority, there's nobody to push back. So this is back to, again, something Dan Carlin says. What happens when the other guy does it? You may praise Trump, or you may praise the Republicans for doing what they just did, which is pushing like Amy Barrett straight through, right, in 3 weeks prior to election. But what happens when Obama does that? Are you still okay with that? Are you still okay with, well, that's in the Constitution, that's how it was written, or is it have more class, dignity, and what's best for the country if you're 3 weeks from, or in our case, what she just got confirmed yesterday, and we're like a week away from the election. We couldn't wait to see what happened at the election, and everything got flipped. We couldn't wait. No, okay, we'll wait to see what happens when the next guy does, because this tit for tat retribution cycle is about to punch conservatives in the mouth. And I see the appeal of Trump. I do. And for anybody to say, well, where did Trump come from? They haven't been paying attention for the last 30 years, because it was about 30 years ago I discovered Rush Limbaugh's TV show in about 1992 or 93, when he was ranting and raving constantly about the same things that conservatives constantly rave about now, about the liberal left wanting to control what they say, what they do, their actions. Well, sorry guys, I'm as libertarian as it gets, and that's not America. Even a federal mask mandate. I'm as big a COVID believer as there is.
You are.
I am.
Annoyingly.
Well, put your mask on, shut up. But at the end of the day, you know me well enough to know there's no way I'm supporting a mandate, supporting America. What I would support is that the government has a responsibility to engage the scientists that they all hire in CDC and NIH and all that crap, and let everybody know the facts and what they suggest that we should do. But after that, it's on you. Now, am I saying that there may not become a point where the federal government needs to step in and lay down a mandate? Sure. If we've got people dropping left and right and still people are not doing what they're supposed to be doing, if you've got, you know what I'm saying, millions and millions dying a day. I don't know what point you do it, but I don't think that we're there yet. I don't think we're there where Americans are just going to accept that. And I honestly believe that if we got to that point, there's a point where Americans would do it on their own. I really believe that, for the most part. They'd be like, screw that. It's getting bad out there. I'm putting my darn mask on, or I'm just not going out, or something. I just don't think that we're there yet, and I think Americans are still a little bit of that rugged individualist where, like yourself, you're willing to take a risk because you're not doing it, because you're American, and you have that right. And that's one of the things we love about America. And it's one of the things that people love about Trump. I've said it myself. I've advocated for years and years that there should be a president that wasn't a politician. Let's get like a CEO or somebody like that into office. I just think we picked the wrong one.
Yeah. I don't know if I want to say we picked the wrong one, because I really do think he did some good things in his first term. I think he did some really bad things in his first term. But I think he did some good things. I think we needed someone that wasn't scared to say what he thought.
And that's what we admire about him, because we're American.
Yeah, he was willing to go out there full bravado and just let you know this is how it is, and this is what needs to be done.
But when those actions become detrimental to our country and our society, we needed a leader smart enough to pull back and say, hey, wait a second, that's not what I meant.
Like I said, there's things I really liked about him, there's things I really didn't like about him. I don't know if there was anyone else that could have done it, though. I don't know if there was another CEO-esque person with the draw and the charisma that could have sat there and got that position. That's the thing, is part of the whole political atmosphere is not necessarily, who knows the ins and outs of politics the best. It's who puts on the best show. Politics nowadays turned into the biggest reality TV show we have. And unfortunately, that's the truth. Is the political realm is now a reality TV show. You don't believe me? There are how many 24-hour cycles of news now? What, 17 cable channels that are complete 24-hour cycles of news? It's a reality TV show.
Well, I'm going to push back on you a little bit because you said, when you started this, you said that you don't think that there's anyone else who could have done it. Well, first of all, I'd say done what, but I think I know what you mean by could have brought the bravado to the office.
Yes.
Like,
well, I don't think anyone else could have got elected.
I don't know. I mean, so go back to what Plato said. In Plato's Republic, Plato said that what the politic of Greece at the time was lacking was philosopher kings, and throughout history that's been echoed is philosopher kings. It's where are the philosopher kings? And that was the question at the end of the Republic: is where are the philosopher kings? Where are the guys that, like you said, have that drive and that bravado to get up there and want to do it, but then also have the faculties to be the philosopher that can, like King Solomon, that can, bring peace or always find wisdom. And the reason I say that Trump is the wrong one, because Trump isn't a philosopher, he's only a king. And that's one of the failures I've seen in the way that he's attempted to run the country, is that he doesn't understand that in the United States we have to rule by committee. That, for starters, we've got the executive, the judicial, and the legislative branches of government that are co-equal, that are supposed to be equal. Second of all, usually what our presidents almost always do is they rule by committee. They surround themselves with tons of genius people, which Trump did at first. But Trump's proclivity for sycophantism, for having people suck up to him, for yes men always being surrounded, for his failure as a philosopher. Philosophy is the scrutiny. That's what philosophy is having your ideas scrutinized. Well, Trump doesn't have that. They say, and I mean, I've read both of Woodward's books now. I've read Mattis. They all say the same thing. He does not like any criticism. Well, that's just the king part. You can't be a good king without listening to what your counselors tell you.
Name me 2 CEOs you think could have got elected president.
Well, I don't necessarily agree anymore that it should have been a CEO, but I mean, as far as better choices, I think Trump may have proven to me anyway that somebody that doesn't have significant political experience does not belong in that office, because it should be evident to everyone that his lack of political skill is what has, made him, he may very well lose by the largest margin ever lost by.
The problem is it goes back to, I don't say political, it's diplomacy, is when you take someone who is a CEO, who is a shrewd business person, they don't get there by, compromise. They don't get there by, let me get this and then we'll let you get that. They get there by, Hannibalism.
Sure.
We're taking it all.
Sure.
We're Greece, we're Rome in, the early 800s. We're taking everything.
Yeah, we're going to devour.
Yeah, that's how they become powerful executives and CEOs.
Kill the competition, buy the competition.
Yep. Right. You don't get that way. So, with me saying I don't know if there could have been anyone else got elected, I don't know if there's another CEO-esque person who has the Tony Stark-esque mindset. The larger-than-life personality. The people love him, but they also know the flaws, right, and still love him.
The philosopher king.
But he's not a philosopher. He's a CEO. He's a businessman. And that's what we elected. We elected a businessman because, one, the economy was in a bad place.
Tony Stark was a bad comparison because his company literally made bombs and missiles for war efforts. But
Trump bought up low-income housing and turned it into mansions and penthouses.
Not necessarily a bad thing. You want to get into that?
So I'm just saying, if you want to compare tit for tat, he took houses away from housing restrictions away. He took away housing developments from people.
Well, when we started this, the direction I really wanted to go was I don't believe anymore that a CEO has any business being president. Trump's done that for me.
I still disagree with you. I want to see someone in office that has the mindset and the ability to be able to, push their way through and make the tough decisions and make the tough economical decisions. I love the restrictions he put on places. I hated the fact he pulled them away 15 days after he put them up there. I want to see someone who's willing to sit there and toughly negotiate and put America first. And, we're not, I don't say all or nothing, but we're not giving you half because you haven't earned half. We're taking our percentage of what we've fought for and what we've worked towards. And that's how we're going to compromise. I don't want to see someone that's willing to, well, we're going to work really hard on this, but we're going to give you half the credit also. But we're going to put most of the work into it. I don't want to see that. I don't, that's not what I like. I want to see someone who's got the stones to step up there and take charge.
But isn't that just fuel for nationalism?
I don't have a problem with
it
nationalism.
all. We're the best. Well, you're wrong.
I don't have a problem with it, honestly. I think that's, America's built on people who are willing to fight for what they need, what they want, and keep what they earned. Fight for that. I don't have a problem with that. I have empathy, and I think there are people who struggle and need help.
Well, I don't either, but what you just said, you just created a contradiction. You just said that the country needs people who are willing to fight and basically be proud of what they earned and what they own. Well, that's fine, but that's not what nationalism is. Nationalism is pride in something you didn't accomplish, not something you did.
No. Sorry, that I misunderstood what you're saying. I feel you should fight and fight for what you work for, fight for what you earn. Still have empathy, still be able to take care of the ones who are lesser and can't. But I don't think you need to take care of the ones who are lesser but can. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's that typical, I'm tired of paying other people's welfare argument.
And that's not welfare. Like, I have no problem with welfare. I think welfare has got a reason, and the way the system started, there's a purpose for it. There's people who get unemployed. Like right now, the COVID situation is so bad, people are losing jobs left and right. They need help.
Sure.
I believe there should be a model, like your model for people getting off of drugs. There should be a model for people to get off of welfare. It shouldn't be a substitute for working. One of the greatest things, what got us out of the Great Depression was Eisenhower created these huge things that people had to do to earn money. We built an interstate system. We built dams.
Civilian Conservation Corps?
Yes.
That was Roosevelt.
I'm sorry. Roosevelt. Built these things and made these things happen. I think, for people on welfare systems, I think they should have to do so much community service.
I agree with you 100%.
That.
I always have.
But that goes back to the same thing with your, if you're going to get people, you want to legalize drugs, that's fine. But they have to be able to do something to better society.
But inevitably, what we've already proven, Ricky, with welfare is where you and I see that as the paradigm, as the ideal of what should be. It wouldn't work out that way, because here's what would really happen. So the state requires that all people on welfare do, say, 8 hours a week of community service, whether it be picking up trash on the highway or whatever. And then immediately people run to their doctors, right? And they get profiles. I don't know what you'd call them. Don't know what a profile in the Army is, where you don't have to do PT because you went to the doctor, and the doctor said you don't have to do PT. So they basically get profiles, and they don't have to pick up garbage. Inevitably, we would create a whole new bureaucracy that would be costly, that would cost more money than, in effect, what we put into the system. It's no different than Andrew Yang's universal basic income idea. To get rid of all the bureaucracy, red tape, paperwork, and employees that work for the welfare system, and just send everybody a check. You'd be better off.
Ooh, that's a tough one.
It's the same thing for welfare, but since you're addressing welfare, you can't address the largest welfare state. You can't neglect to address the largest welfare state in the world, and the largest socialist system in the world. Do you know what the largest socialist welfare system in the world is?
I'm dying to hear this.
The United States military.
Yeah.
And it really is. By any measure, economic measure, take the emotion out of it. I know we love our veterans. We're both veterans. I get it. But still, it's the largest socialist welfare system in the world. And the second most, I guess you'd have to say, if you added up dollars and pennies, would have to be the American banking system. Because, going all the way back to Bush or who was it that was the first Black Tuesday? Was it Reagan in the 80s?
Mm-hmm.
when they first really started bailing out the banks, the corporate banks.
Yes.
And if you added all that money up, I bet they've gotten 100 times more than the welfare system could consume in 1,000 years. But people are okay with that. People are okay with the banks getting, bailouts and putting more and more money into the military where it may not be necessary. But they get mad when 1% of a state's
playing the best of the 80s, 90s, and now. This is FM 106.9 and AM 1340 W.
There you go.
Well, and on that note, I guess we should wrap up, Ricky.
Oh, we talked longer than we usually do.
And the funny thing is, I had no script, nothing. I didn't even know what I was going to say today. But you know me, I don't ever have a problem filling an hour with my mouth.
Thanks for tuning in today, folks. This has been Liberty is Treason. Catch us the second and fourth Tuesday of each month. As next, well, I guess the next time we're on will be after the election.
Yeah, are we doing it that night? Election
We're going to election night. We'll be on air election night for coverage, as you can tune in. Myself, Cody, and a couple other special guests will be in the building.
And that's not going to count for our...
No.
Okay, because November 10th, we've got a special guest coming.
Yep. So we'll be on election night. Make sure you tune in and catch us discussing all the results here on WCDT.
Or non-results, as we know the case may be.